Self-leadership. What is it? Why do you need it? And how to develop it. I've been writing, speaking, coaching on self-leadership for over 20 years. My first book with Dr. Anna Kazan, I like to call it the Red Book, is used on MBA programs around the world to help students to understand self-leadership, particularly to assist them in their studies. My 2016 book, I like to call the Blue Book, is a handbook for developing your self-leadership and was a bestseller on Amazon. So I am very deep into the topic of self-leadership, and I coach executives around the world to develop their self-leadership so that they can develop the self-leadership in their teams. The definition of self-leadership that's in the Red Book with Dr. Anna Kazan is as follows: that self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feelings, and actions towards your objectives. It is a practice of. It's about intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards an objective. Now, do you remember your birth? Of course you don't. But surprisingly, I actually have been at a number of births, and I can tell you with some certainty what happened at the moment of your birth. Your mother brought you into this world. Maybe the doctor or the midwife held you up, and then within a few moments, you were given a name, a nationality, an ethnicity, a gender, and possibly a religion and a football team to follow. You see, you have been framed. We are all framed from the moment of our birth with our DNA, and then as we grow up in terms of our parenting, the culture we're born into, our schooling. We are framed, and that framing actually influences the way we see the world, and our ability to influence ourselves is dependent on us stepping back from that frame and realizing we've been pre-programmed. Last year, my daughter Tasha, who's just turned 16, told me that she was struggling to see things at a distance. She needed glasses. And so I took her to the optometrist. And on the drive to the optometrist, she asked me some questions because she's super curious. She's about to become an adult. And she says to me, "Dad, how do I learn to drive?" And I said, "That's easy. I'll teach you. I'm a good driver. And I think I'm a pretty good teacher." And she said, "Okay, but how do I know where to go?" And I said, "Well, it's easy for you. You've got GPS. I had to learn from an A to Z how to navigate London." She said, "Oh, but how do I know which street?" I said, "Well, that's easy. You'll be able to read the street signs." Now, she looked a little confused, but at that moment, we arrived at the optometrist. She took an assessment, and it's a great franchise where they deliver you the glasses within 20 minutes. She puts on her new glasses and she says, "Wow, I can see that sign at a distance." But that wasn't the epiphany for me. The epiphany for me was when we were driving home and she said, "Oh, wow, there are street names on those street signs." I didn't realize that her framing hadn't allowed her to see the signs. And that's how most people live their lives. They are a passenger on the bus of life. But with self-leadership, we can be the driver, not the passenger. Now, this is Jason Statham from the movies Transporter. You can see the similarity. Actually, the only similarity is that we both drive Audis. Oh, maybe the bald head. But here's the thing. Are you the driver of your life? And one of the ways to check that is the absence of self-leadership. What is the absence of self-leadership? Well, you've probably seen it in members of your team, but have you thought about it for yourself? The absence of self-leadership is reactivity, randomness, blame, and a victim mindset. And so why self-leadership is important is to become the driver and avoid these symptoms. And here is the maxim, and I hope you'll agree with me, that you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. Do you agree? Now, McKinsey Institute recently did a survey, in fact, in 2021, did a survey on the skills required during the future of work or in the future of work. And they came up with 56 deltas, which are made up of mindsets and skills. And 25% of those are self-leadership. Now, I've been teaching, researching, and measuring self-leadership for a period of time. In fact, I built the world's first situational judgment test for self-leadership, where we can measure your self-awareness, your self-regulation, and your self-learning, and therefore work out a developmental plan for you. So what does that mean? Well, self-awareness. Self-awareness is the tendency for an individual to focus on and reflect on their own psychological processes and inner experiences, as well as their relationships to others. Let's do a quick psychometric test for you right now. So this is a chessboard, probably all familiar with chess even if you don't play it. What I want you to do is to choose a piece on a chessboard that most represents your personality at work. Now, if you don't know the pieces, don't worry, let's go through them one by one and I'll explain their characteristics. We start with the pawns. There are 8 on each side. They move slowly towards the opposition and are likely to be sacrificed early in a game of chess. Now, if you're feeling powerless at work, you would be a pawn. Next is the rook or the castle. This is a risk-averse piece and doesn't move early in the game. And so audit or compliance and sometimes technology is in the rook category. Very powerful, but not necessarily in a good position early in the game. Next comes the knight. Now this is the risk-embracing piece. This is the entrepreneur, jumps forwards, sideways, surprises the enemy. The problem for the knight is sometimes he or she gets so far ahead of the other pieces that they lack the support. Sound familiar to some of you? Then there's the bishop, and this piece cuts diagonally across the board. This is a piece in a hurry, hates standard operating procedures, just wants to sell the customer before R&D has finished developing it or operations has worked out how to deliver it, and is the archenemy of the rook or the castle. And then, of course, comes the queen. Now, in the original Indian game of chess, the queen was the vizier, so this is not gender specific. But the queen can go forwards and backwards and diagonally. She can go everywhere, but she's so busy looking after everybody else, she sometimes forgets to look after herself. And then finally, there's the king. Now, if you chose the king, maybe you have delusions of grandeur and narcissistic tendencies. Because the king, whilst most important piece on the board, requires all other members of the team to support him or her. Now, I don't care which piece you chose. It doesn't really matter because this was a setup. Because you've been framed. The real lesson here is to have the self-awareness to step back from those stereotypes and play all the pieces. Maybe even play multiple games of chess simultaneously, like the Grandmaster Bobby Fischer, who was the first American to beat the Russians. So, how do you build self-awareness? Work with a coach. Because self-learning is the next fundamental. Self-learning is the process by which individuals take the initiative in diagnosing their learning needs, goals, resources, and outcomes. Now, here's another story about another one of my kids, Nathan. I was playing chess with Nathan. I taught him to play, and he quickly caught up with me and actually surpassed me in his chess skills. And I remember one game we were playing and he had me absolutely cornered and locked up. But I knew with my self-leadership mindset is that when we feel the most stuck, that's often when there's an opportunity. And I stayed and I looked at the board and sure enough, I found an opportunity to not just get out of the trap, but to turn the game around. And that is the mindset of self-learning, is looking for options. From options, we move into self-regulating, sometimes called self-management. And self-regulating is the process of modulating attention, emotion, and behavior to a given situation, stimulus, for the purpose of pursuing a goal. Self-regulation allows us to find the opportunities. Opportunity from the Latin phrase ob portum ventens, meaning a favorable wind. Just as a typhoon is a wind, a hurricane is a wind, an opportunity is a particular type of wind that brings you towards your port. You see, with self-regulation, we can take action when opportunities arise. Now, each morning there's an opportunity to get up and exercise. Some of us take that opportunity. I do at periods of my life. Sometimes then I let it backslide. My self-regulation drops back. But if I want to make sure I'm going to go for a walk or a run or exercise in the morning, I make sure that my gym shoes, my shorts, my t-shirt are by my bed so that I get out of bed and I'm ready to go. There are various things that we can do to track our self-regulation. You can wear a Fitbit that lets you know how many steps you've taken. So we want to set up our work environment so it triggers us to be in the best state to do the work that we need. And again, whether it's time management or focus, whatever it is that you need, sometimes it's best to work with a coach to help you be the best version of yourself. So the big frame here is to set an intention, to see the frames, which are options, to set your own frame, which is opportunity. Self-leadership leads to options and opportunities. Always look for the options and the opportunities. Remember to be self-aware. What frame am I operating from? To be learning to take the feedback, make the adjustment, just like a sailor adjusting the wind and the sails. Adjusting the sails and the tiller for the wind and aiming for your port. And interestingly, since I'm using a lot of sailing metaphors here, there is a great quote here from Dr. Viktor Frankl. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is what being a leader is, because you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. You need to be able to set your course. And regardless of what happens, foul winds, stormy seas, you will continue to have the persistence because you have the intention to achieve your goals by regulating your thinking, feeling, and actions towards those goals. And the poem Invictus by Henley, made famous by Nelson Mandela. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So self-leadership is that inner resilience. It is the flexibility to find the course. It is choosing your frame rather than accepting the frames of your birth and your upbringing and all of the above programming, that you can remove that OEM software and design your own. Self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. And intention changes the causal chain. It doesn't matter what has happened in the past. When you change your intention, you change your future, because you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. And then you can encourage everybody that follows you to take ownership, to be an adult, to take ownership for their thinking, feeling, and actions, and not to be a dependent. And this allows you to scale your team, your department, and your company. So that is a brief introduction to self-leadership. I'm Andrew Bryant. It's been my pleasure. Intentionally influence your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives.